Building Mental Toughness in Sport, an introduction into sports psychology for athletes. Written and read by me, Benjamin Bonetti. The last few inches of the body make the biggest difference in sport, yet are those most forget to train. This audiobook is sold subject to the conditions that it shall not, by way of trade or otherwise, be lent, resold, hired out, or otherwise circulated without the publisher's prior consent in any form of binding or cover other than that in which it's published, and without a similar condition including this condition being imposed on the subsequent publisher, for you and nobody else. This introduction into increasing mental toughness is not designed to be the sole solution to your search for improvement, but a thought-provoking tool. It's a snippet of what's available in our more comprehensive coaching platforms, or the new encyclopedia of sports psychology, which is available on the website. No formats, just words. Enjoy. So it starts your journey. Throughout this book, there's going to be a number of questions, which I'm going to invite you to complete. So, first off, who are you? Write this down now in less than 500 words. What is your legacy? How will you be remembered? I'm here to help you understand the choices that you've made, the reasons why you're doing what you're doing, and perhaps a number of questions that you've had that still remain unanswered. I've been coaching people for the last 10 years, and during that time, most of the questions I've had from clients are the same. The same questions come from business owners, entrepreneurs, parents, children, and athletes. Everybody faces the same challenges, and it's because of one reason. We haven't been taught how to think. Think about it. When was the last time that you entered into a space where they taught you strategies that improved your ability to think? Very likely, never. So what are the questions? And why are they always the same variations, despite the very different upbringings, beliefs, and needs? The questions asked are generally based on how you become better, how you can increase your confidence, how you can keep motivated when times are tough, where you're going wrong, why others don't understand you, or even why you don't understand yourself. You may also fear the unknown, fear failure and success, and ultimately, you believe you're not good enough. Why? I'm going to help you manage those thoughts. Manage yourself a whole lot more. Some will make sense to you, and other things not so much. But in knowing them, you have an increased awareness in the choices that you make. But more on this later. Before we get started, you might want to grab a pen and a notebook. I suggest a notebook because then you have the ability to refer back to it and continue to build upon those thoughts and can develop strategies that you can reflect on in the future. An A5 type notebook works best. Use each page as a new progression in your life and have the ability to line out those documented aspects once completed. There are a few select choices on our website. Within this, we're going to work through a systematic program that will offer you the journey of realization and build upon a better version of self. There will be conflict, there will be the need to supply me with your trust, and you will need to take action. To start with, it's important that we align ourselves not to the past, but to the future version of self. The major difference is that I'm making the assumption that you're here because the past version of self is not good enough. It can be either improved or offers little in terms of internal fulfillment. The future version of self is perhaps a realization that there is more to life, that there is more to you, and that the time is ticking. And it's important for you to achieve the percentage of what you intended, perhaps even as a child. Or you're being coached at the moment, and you're questioning the ability of that coach, and whether it's a true reflection of your own growth and development. And you're just checking out whether I can offer any confirmation or clarity over those thoughts. To control these thoughts, we must first understand that despite the mind being complex, the system actually is incredibly simple. And if you're in that place of frustration, you can give yourself permission now to forgive. Forgive because you can't be expected to understand something that you've not been taught. And if you're frustrated because you're stuck, the likelihood is that you're simply missing knowing where to go to access the next piece of the puzzle. I'm making the assumption that at your school, college, university, or even within a job, you weren't given direct or clear instructions on how your thought processes work and how to utilize them in the best possible way. Because of this, I'm going to invite you to forgive. I'm repeating this because it's essential. All the time that you're holding on to the past anger, frustration, resentment, or living within a state of ego, you'll be locked into those limitations. Forgive yourself now for not knowing. If you don't feel that it is time, and you like the immersion within the past pain, then I'm not sure that really this is the right time for you. And that is also okay. I remember talking to a business owner who applied for coaching a few years ago that became increasingly frustrated when I told him that the world wasn't ready for his new thinking. And I couldn't work with that. Only to be told 3 years later when we met again that I was right. 2 years after that, I saw an opening and called him. He is now on one of the most influential speaking circuits talking about timing. You see, if you're not prepared to be truthful about your timing or ability, then you're miles behind where you should be. You can only trick the mind or body energy for so long until the person's ability overpowers the character that you've been playing. So with your pen and notebook, I want you to write down quickly, within 3 minutes, without conscious effort, what you want to change, and more importantly, why you want to change for the better. Specifics are essential at this stage, so I'd rather you complete just one thing and have all of the specifics than a long list of stuff with no real detail. So stop now and complete this. I ask this now because I've worked with hundreds of people over the last 10 years, and many have come through my doors because they've been forced and are not freely willing to make the changes of their own accord. They've been told that they have an issue or problem, perhaps even a bad habit, and only seeking help because it's in conflict with another's ideal of the world and how they should be living it. If you're not ready to change yet, then stop right here and avoid the temptation to waste your time because it just won't work. This is applicable to all aspects of life, from relationships to those standing at a workbench for 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, complaining about how unhappy they have been and have been for the last 20 years. The person who smokes that doesn't want to give up will always find a way to return to that bad habit. There are a few who break the mold, but when you dig deep enough, they're just conforming to this thinking. Until you reach the point where the future version of pain is strong enough, avoid the temptation to lie to yourself or lie to others, because you'll find a way to get back into that old thinking pattern, because it's comfortable. Hopefully this is a bit of a wake-up call to those who aren't convinced. Give up now. If you're still here, then I believe that you're one of the select few. 17% of those who started wouldn't have completed the first exercise, and about 4% would have turned off to any suggestion by now. For those remaining, I believe that you're listening now because of something great. So, I want you to truly know and honestly answer why now is the right time for you. The second thing I want you to consider is why you have limited control on the factors outside self, but have absolute control on how they are represented. So it's important to understand that you're just going to have to accept some things. You don't have control over the weather, but you have control over your diet. It's as simple as that. As you start to evolve your thinking into a new space, you'll start to notice the words that others use and how sometimes they become caught up in the dramas of the uncontrollable. You have to be prepared to delete the aspects of your past and those around you in the present that aren't supporting the future version of self that you desire today. You know already internally what changes you're going to have to make, and there may be those that will become hurt in the process. But ultimately you're only hurting yourself and prolonging the pain by allowing it to continue, whatever that is. So has this triggered any connection? Once you've decided on the level of commitment and how much you want to change, Then we move on to knowing who you are. Not the inherited belief about who you are, but the truth about who you are right now. And then we build upon that to find your legacy, making the assumption that you don't know it already. You see, the past is not a representation of who you are, and neither is the future. Consciously deciding on who you are in the present and how you're acting in the present will determine what you're going to achieve. This is the secret to success. Because of the importance of understanding the difference between the past and the future version of self, I invite you right now to be accepting of change and be prepared to do what it takes when you face challenges. Some of what I'm saying may not make sense to you, and that's okay, because just by listening to the words, you're absorbing all that you need to ensure that you're aligning yourself to the true and honest future version of self. So let's get started. Ownership over thoughts. As we begin to change as humans, it's important to understand that we take ownership over thoughts, because our thoughts become behaviours, which become either our enjoyment or our failures. It begins with ownership. I'm not going to break down the chemical reactions of the brain or the various connections within the nervous system. I just want you to know that you're connected, that you've got to take ownership, and the sooner that you do, the sooner you'll be able to understand how to manipulate the thoughts to produce exactly what you want. Manipulate until a positive habit is formed and no conscious consideration is made. For years we've been told that there's a difference between the mind and the body, but in truth for me, there is only one, and that is self. It combines all that we are and, most importantly, all that we create. If you read any of my previous work, you understand that I talk about the 3 pillars of success, these being nutrition. What you consume passes your lips and allows for physical growth and development, repair and recovery, supporting fitness and mindful well-being. This is usually the first thing that an athlete considers changing when they meet a blockage, but in truth is usually the last thing that they take seriously. Fitness, what enables the body to mobilize more productively in a way that supports thoughts and behaviors. In a similar way to a high-functioning machine, the greater the understanding of the mechanics, the more refined we are able to tune. This is usually the first thing to change and the main focus for continued growth and development. Mindful well-being, the clarity of thoughts that supports nutrition and fitness. How clear you can think in the present moment and what allows further thinking and development. Despite being the last thing that an athlete considers changing, in a recent study, 87% of athletes believed that it was the biggest restriction they had. So why is it divided into 3? You see, this version of self, the one that's listening, has the choice to be many different characters, and often confuse which character they are playing. And if you think about it in your current life, the likelihood is that you'll be playing at least 1 or 2 right now. You could be playing a parent or a partner, a business owner or an employee, an athlete or a coach. And this is where most of the identity confusion takes place. I liken this to an actor who, when playing many characters on stage and under pressure, has the potential to mix up the lines, being confused over who says what and when they are supposed to deliver. The more characters you play, the greater the increase in those behaviours that are displayed that are considered to be out of character. The mind functions in a similar way. So in order to create a better version of self, and one that supports you in the most productive and helpful way, you are to remove the clouded mist of these various characters and understand who you truly are. 47% of conflict most commonly occurs within athletes as they attempt to work out their identity, usually as a result of those who have pursued a sport as a result of external pressure, living perhaps of the inherited beliefs passed on by parents, teachers, coaches, or anyone else that has played a part within your growth and development so far. If you're an athlete, I'm going to guess that you've been into some dark places based on your external pressures and the high expectations of those mentioned previously. The good news is that there is little need for you to enter this space again. Unless, of course, you want to and have taken ownership over this being the only person you can. So I want you to know, as you develop and grow, and you remove some of the characters, you will meet conflict. And I want you to be okay with that. Be okay with the growth and development, understanding that there will be loss, which will make room to build upon the true version of self. We replace, we do not remove. One important factor for you. You need to stop wasting time. You need to stop wasting time living someone else's dream. You need to think about what is important for you and why now is the right time for you to take the action needed to become that person, to live by your own standards, live by your own expectations, and to be honest with yourself. Because with every day that passes that you are not realizing that dream, you are wasting time that cannot be recouped, and wasting the time of those investing in you. Harsh but true, and you know it deep down. So it's time for a clear out. Answer the following questions. Who are you? Why are you not taking action to live your life? What are you holding on to? What happens if you fail to make the changes needed? Why is now the right time to change? Why should you take control over your life? What inherited beliefs about self do you have? Expectations. I welcome you to give up any ideas about what you think you can learn here and now, removing any thoughts that you've had before starting, and remove any ideas about where perhaps it's going to lead you. If another athlete has recommended this program, then remove the expectation. Your results will be different. The reason I invite you to do this is because in society we've become like sheep. We've become people that follow instructions despite understanding and realizing what truth is. Here and now, I'm giving you the space to free yourself from these shackles and take ownership over your life, your athletic performance, and open up the possibility to being more than you are being told. This isn't some alternative thinking style like some cynical people would suggest. This is real. Many of the people that come into my clinic or my coaching practice believe that they are broken as a result of the comparison they are making to an image, not even created by their own thoughts. They're not to blame, nor is there anything wrong. They are not ill, broken, or require fixing, like nearly all assume. You see, our mind is like a sponge. It draws in what we guide it to, and on some occasions we dip it in the wrong bucket. Not only that, it has to contend with the masses of sales and manipulation messages on a daily basis. And we only have to look at the food labels to understand this further, with many people accepting that a ready-made meal is healthier than fresh, whole fruits and vegetables. We know what the truth is, but sometimes the lazy part of thinking accepts what we're being told and doesn't question the answers that we're being given. Behind almost every large branded item is a team of marketeers headed by some of the world's leading psychologists. It's hard to escape unless you shift thinking into a questioning mindset. So how do we get over this? Well, firstly, we need to relearn how to think, relearn how to question what we are being sold, and retrain that lazy habit to become part of a better version of self. Never has my son come home from school and explained to me how he spent the day learning how to improve his thoughts to produce better results through asking better questions. Nor do his peers walk around the supermarket questioning the labels on truth, like he's been taught. Rather, he's being given information to regurgitate. I'm inviting you to change that way of thinking, to forge a new dynamic version of self that is stimulated by regaining control over your thoughts and the questions you're asking, and as a result, your behavior. This may take some time, and I'm okay with that as you enter into a self-revolution, not evolution. But most of it will be based on an external reflection of self, and as a result of that and the misalignments, many athletes fail. They enter a downward spiral of accepting fake truth, to which they have been sold, and in which they have reached disappointment, and then they give up. This is not truth. Truth is only based on the present, in me talking and in you listening, digesting the information I'm relaying to you, going to the past to make sense of it all, and then coming back to the present to produce a connection. This is truth, for now. The major advancements I've made within the sports community and with an athlete isn't regurgitating old concepts or theories, but using the tens of thousands of hours working with the elite to understand what works, what is proven to deliver, then apply those models to new simplified strategies. Take a moment to think about this expanded notion. The past has gone, hence it's called the past. The future is yet to happen, and you have control over neither. Sure, you can act now, stop listening, hit the pause button, make a cup of tea and come back, but each of those individual sections will be based on the present moment, none of which you have the ability to return to, and none of which you have the ability to change. So inviting you to relinquish those old ways of thinking, live in a harsh reality that only you have control in the present, and not to bother exercising any energy in either the past or the future. Now, as a result of thinking in this new way, you will encounter not only new thinking patterns, but also plenty of resistance. And this is fine, and simply highlights that you're becoming more effective in questioning. You will meet those who will prefer the old you. You'll be called selfish, and even think at times that the past offered a better understanding of life and return to new habits. This is our instinct, to return to the known. And this is the second habit you're going to have to break. On the topic of removing bad habits or thoughts, I want you to start thinking about the choices that you have and whether to reject or accept aspects of the external world. Perhaps even notice from this point forward, how willing others are to give their opinions about who you are, what you are to become, and the reasons why. The more you start to practice this, the more aware you will become about the external influences that have been building the foundations of your life, and how accepting perhaps you have been up until this moment. Your eyes will start to open as a result, and you'll be more conscious over the company you'll keep, and you'll choose to accept or decline. From this, your perception of truth and reality will change because of the projection of another is not the reflection of you or the reflection of them. It is an attempt for them to connect and make sense of you and your behaviours. Okay, so now I've asked you to remove another's impression of where you should live and where your boundaries are. I want to ask yourself whether the thoughts and questions you're asking yourself are supporting you or supporting those old patterns. Are you acting in the past? Are you thinking in the past? Are you utilizing the past experiences to determine how your future may look, even the way that you act? Pause for a moment to digest this. The more that we live in the past, the more we produce the same results of what the past produced. And although that may be okay for some, I'm making the assumption here that you've moved beyond that way of thinking. And now it's time for you to truly live the way that you want. Perhaps even the vision that you had as a child, the dreams and aspirations you had during your younger days that are yet to materialize. Perhaps you've known something that you've avoided until now, and just with hearing it, deciding how things can't continue and why now is the right time. Perhaps the only thing that has been holding you back in high performance is for you to take control over your life. Think back to when you were 7 years old. What did your future look like, and what choices were you making at the time? Sure, the visions of a 7-year-old, for most anyway, are unlikely to draw a true representation of the future. But what if you were able to go back to that time and talk to that version of self? What would you say about the choices that you'd make? In doing this simple exercise, you highlight perhaps those areas that weren't addressed or highlighted during the previous exercises. If needed, write them down now and think about why these have been brought up at the moment. What if you now look to the future version of self, reflected back to your legacy statement, for the answers to the choices that you're making in the present moment? What if you shifted this way of thinking? What would happen if you took the future as a representation of the choices that you make right now? And how would those choices be different? Think about one choice you have to make today and notice the differences in answers produced if you went to the future and acted compared to the past and acted. Write them down now. Now, there are many theories about the hierarchies of needs, and I'm sure you've come across several in any previous research you've done. What I'm going to ask you to do now is to trust your gut. Trust your gut, knowing that it's protecting you from the dangers of life, and slow down. But more on this later. From experience, athletes tend to speed up every aspect of their life. They speed up the need in relationships. They speed up the need when it comes to decisions that they make. And we also speed up the need to communicate, especially when restricted by time. A recommendation here is to slow down. Pause before making choices. Slow down, pause, think about your future self, and act in the present. If you're unsure how to do this, go to the website and download a copy of our meditation audio. 5 minutes out first thing in the morning, and then repeated in the evening, has proven time and time again to stabilize thoughts and the ability to think with increased clarity. Remember, your internal processor limits you. The more you overload it, the more filtering it has to contend with. Revenge, the hidden evil living within us. I want to make this clear. Revenge has never produced anything that will significantly improve your life for the better, unless, of course, it is to prove something wrong and waste masses of energy following the wrong path. I meet many athletes years into their training who are looking to prove something, not because of an inner desire to better themselves, but to prove something to someone who no longer matters. And even if they do, it's time to face the reality that it will never produce true fulfillment. I'm sure this is something that everyone has experienced at least once in their life, where the choice to follow a certain path was not based on an aspiration to achieve something for themselves, but it was fueled by an element of demonstration of strength. I call this the inner idiot. We all have one that pops in every now and then. The truth is that the only truth is your truth. The truth that you're living right now may not be in perfect alignment to your future self, so you're acting in that space of not truth. Repetitive, yes, but it's essential that you bring truth into your thoughts, again challenging the characters that you've been playing out and establishing a person that is in control. When you flip this way of thinking, some will call it selfish, but I want you to realize that when you're acting in the best interest of self, you no longer become selfish, but it becomes self-preservation. An active internal truth, internal alignment, which many don't get. Of course, there are those that believe that they are acting in truth and still selfish, but only do so because they're misaligned. They are the wolves, conditionally taking not for their own purpose or security, just because they can. Odd statement, I know. When you really start to open your eyes, look for what is needed, commit 100% towards finding it without distraction, the solution will be there. You become the shepherd, no longer guided by social conformity or the expectations of another's value or belief. As you start to uncover the truth and flip this way of thinking, you'll start to notice opportunities that support that version of self. It has happened with every client I've ever worked with. The more they establish what they want, the more they see what is required to get themselves to that place. It's like a switch that has finally turned on, and they are no longer living in darkness. Just reflecting back to others for a moment. The opinion of others doesn't really count unless you choose to accept them. Thinking back to the attempt to prove others wrong, is there any aspect of your thinking that needs to be changed right now? Because any misalignment will cause conflict, and it's usually at the time of specific need where this conflict will rear its ugly head. The objective is to remove any stress, triggers of the past, to ensure that when pressure is applied, the state remains stable. It's essential that you find your driving force, the thing that wakes you in the night, and the one key aspect that makes you unique and drives you to be the best. With all that I said about another's representation of how you should be living your life, and with ownership, now it's important to understand that with this control comes its own challenges. If you've been a passenger in your own life and are now taking the seat of the driver, you will encounter new challenges. You may have to make some stops along the way and maybe a few detours. Having control has its own responsibilities. It's worth noting at this stage that there's going to be many backseat drivers, not just externally but internally too. And it's usually the internal backseat driver that will ask you to make unscheduled stops along the way. To just be aware of this, like there's no wrong, living in the present control of your destiny and seeking no approval from another based on their own standards, representations of the world, which merges nicely into judgment. Judgment is a factor and an aspect that comes up with almost every client, and there's no fault for this. We have created a society who judge based on materialistic possessions, a gold medal hierarchy, which is very much external. I'm going to invite you now to remove any judgment that you may have had towards another, to love equality just for a few days and see how this version of the world changes. Perhaps even look to see what fulfillment means to you and where this vision may take you. Do you look on with some achieving what you previously wanted with anger, frustration or envy, or look on with questions about their strategy? Same mind, different thinking. As you do, notice how the fight, flight or freeze response changes. How does the future version of self think when you encounter those challenges? What is triggered emotionally that instigates the fight, flight or freeze response? If it produces negative connections, even now, then flip it. See how each of those challenges can be approached differently. See how when we remove judgment, we remove the limitations of self, and we align self to a legacy statement and act in the present moment. In doing this, there is little room or need to fight, flight or freeze, because when you're unsure what to do, the autopilot kicks in and realigns you to that legacy statement. You only become lost when there's no direction set, and you've not mapped accordingly. So this demonstrates the importance of alignment. There will be times when it goes to pot, and you can be okay with this, because sometimes you have limited control. Sometimes things won't go to plan, not because of anything that you've done, or there's been a lack of preparation, but because of certain factors that can't be controlled. The importance is not what's gone wrong, but how you can make it right. How you can move on from learning if required, and developing with additional knowledge that this time provided. You are connected without knowing how. How you connect the dots is as a result of your internal beliefs and your representation of this meaning. It is said that 55% of the way that we communicate is by physiology. Taking this further, this 55% is controlled 100% by the language that we're using internally. If the language is not aligned clearly, focused towards a future version of self, the behaviours demonstrated physically will not be supported. And there'll be times where others will try and hijack your thoughts. When they do, thank them internally for their contribution, make the choice to move on, only in a way that supports growth in the future vision. As a result of this, what you'll find is that the impulsiveness of those negative thoughts will dissolve, and you'll be able to move on quickly into a space in realignment. I know it seems that I'm going on about truth, realignment and future versions, but any athlete want to realize their full potential needs to adopt a forward-thinking attitude rather than one that pulls them back. So quickly now, just in a few words, what does that future version of self look like? Perhaps in 5 words, how you can quickly describe it to a complete stranger. The reinvention of self can be an exciting time, especially if you've been living another's dream without true ownership. Building and regaining control and having ownership over your own life will offer an increased level of focus and the determination and mental toughness unparalleled compared to those living in a mantra-focused state. So control. Control is having ownership over thoughts, seeing the intention behind the thoughts and understanding where those thoughts are trying to lead you. So what I'm going to invite you to do is to question the intention of each of these thoughts that you have and ask yourself where they're attempting to take you and decide if it's where you want to go. The purpose behind this strategy is obvious and will take little conscious effort on your behalf until a habit is forged. Be aware of the past thought strategies that will attempt to creep back in. Ensure that you create enough leverage to ensure that it's not an option for you, and it's certainly not your choice to be mediocre or accept second place. Answer this. What thoughts are you dominated by and why? I mentioned this before, but I think it's important to reconfirm. I don't believe in mantras, and the reason I don't believe in mantras is because they're generally someone else's. And even when you create your own, they are only truth and relevant based on when they were created. So I'm going to invite you to remove them. And if you feel the need that you can't live without them, look to create a mantra based on the present moment exactly when you need it. Therefore, just be. Challenges. I think it's important to reiterate the need to remove yourself from the dramas of another's life. Sure, there are those people that enjoy the pain and suffering and the traumas of the world. Before you own your journey to high performance, it's essential that you live in a space that only is supportive. You could call it a bubble, but I prefer to call it an energy-focused attitude. Think for a moment. Why would you waste a moment of your life to support an unhealthy or unproductive thinking pattern? You may have already been down this path when you outlined forgiveness, but spend just a moment thinking about why perhaps you've been attracted to those or those places in the past. Perhaps why now will be a good time to make the break, and how you can identify quickly those times where drama is being shown and your strategy for the removal. Sticking to the plan. I've been known to ask my clients to remove themselves from everything that doesn't positively support the plan. I have found that having a no matter what attitude allows athletes to quickly, within the present moment, decide whether to immerse themselves or move on. Similar to what we just mentioned. I've already mentioned the importance of being aware of the backseat driver, attempting to override your path and prompt change for their own best interests. So begin to question everything. This isn't to enter a cynical state, but to own all that you see and accept. And by doing so, you remove the variables outside of your control, and as a result, have the ability to fine-tune your strategy until you reach that point that perfectly supports you in the most dynamic way. Once you've fine-tuned, you can then opt to open up self to those dramas. However, from experience, most will distance them further and further attract those who support their current mindset. So tell me your plan for the next 24 hours. Tell me your plan for the next 3 days. Tell me your plan for the next 7 days. Tell me your plan for the next 6 months. Tell me your plan for the next 12 months. Strategies for conflict states. This is something that you can easily adopt. As said previously, you can either immerse yourself in the dramas of life or move on quickly to something that supports you. By creating a strategy you can adopt when you identify yourself being partly or dragged into that environment that is unsupportive to overall well-being. For some it simply means to walk away, while others it can be a simple yes or no. Remember to have ownership over choice, the choice to either continue or to remove yourself. What I am not saying is that you should walk away from anyone that says anything negative, but to spend your time wisely. Hours spent scanning social media at the dramas of people you don't even know is unlikely to have any positive impact when this time could be spent researching an optimized nutrition plan or increasing slow movement techniques. So what is your strategy for removing yourself from a conflict state? Removing labels. The quicker you are able to remove the labels of the past, the sooner you'll be able to realize the true deserving of self without limitations. I've been guilty of this in the past, living within the boundaries inherited from others and their limitations of the possible. I had a fortunate upbringing, but even despite this, There are still limitations and expectations to prove. To me, the more labels you're able to remove, the further you can go to seek those opportunities. We all know the rags to riches stories, the 1 in a million chance to break free, and the lottery winners of the world. But what about us everyday folk, those who go against the odds on a daily basis, and for some like me, who don't place their faith in the lottery? Just think about it for a moment. What if the answers to all of your challenges were slightly outside of the limitations that you've inherited? Wouldn't it be wise to go to that place to expand your field of play, so that you can have your option to either accept or decline what those new boundaries offer? For me, I found more suited opportunities at the far reaches of my limitations than those in the places where I thought I belonged. Therefore, I'm going to invite you right now to check these places out, to explore the limitations beyond where you've been told you should be, and see what you can find. You have nothing to lose but plenty to gain, even in removing that sense of belonging. And then, when we think about it, for most, it's the parents that add this belonging. And even with this being said, it's important that we understand that for most parents they did their best. As a parent myself, I want the best and act in a way that supports this, as we are unique. We want the best for them, and their intentions may not be what is suited for us. Avoid the temptation to seek praise or approval, but live in alignment. When I reached this place of internal belief, one that I'd created for myself and not one I'd chosen to accept, my life changed. You can be emotional when needed, and that's fine, but just know that the quicker that you regain control over your thoughts, the sooner you'll be able to realize the direction forward. I've had clients spend 2 days in the down state of reflection, only to come out stronger once they've decided to pull themselves together and stop wasting time. Because fighting the inner war has never proven to amount to anything worth living. It's important to be truthful here. Why could now be the right time to open up much space, forgive the past, and live in the now? What limitations have you accepted from another? Why would now be a good time to release yourself from these? What new beliefs can you accept, and why? Stop settling for the second best. All too often, athletes are quite happy to be the number 2, to take second-hand advice and not to invest in the best possible advice for them, to hire the mediocre coach, to settle for less than standard conditions, and to become accustomed to being the person that they are. Sure, any athlete starting out can't expect to have the best of everything, but you can certainly have the best of what is within reach. You can alter where you can find true value, something we've already covered. If you think you deserve the best, you will find the best. If you think you deserve second place, that's what you'll find also. I was recently coaching a Commonwealth athlete that failed to recognise this until highlighted. She had reached a high level off the bat without any coaching per se, completely alone and without any professional involvement. Her natural drive and determination had provided the room for her to grow to her own limitations. But after creating a plan to incorporate coaching, her times improved by 3% within just a few weeks. Timing had a large part to play here, but for the most part she had settled for not coaching due to the fact that she didn't feel deserving. Now, we all aren't as fortunate to reach this competitive level without coaching. But what can be learnt here is that the gains of having the best will significantly improve performance. Fact. A note here, there are still some antiquated coaches in the world teaching 1940s training methods. Just as technology has advanced, sports performance has equally evolved. Those who are stuck here will understand what I mean. Ensure that all members of your team are advancing with modern measuring techniques and are able to access the resources required to fine-tune your performance. The car analogy would be, a Ferrari owner took his car to a mechanic. The mechanic has a suitable understanding of the workings of an engine, but doesn't specialise in high-performance engines. A tuning session will not be as productive as if he were to invest the difference in a technician with the suitable equipment and understanding. Just a note on difference. I'm likely one of the most expensive mindful coaches available when you look at the bottom figure for individual coaching. But the difference between the average and the high end is actually marginal. The reason I mention this is because when exploring coaches, make the choice not on price, as many do, but on the difference that they can make. The difference at this end may be significantly less compared to someone who insists on a long drawn-out coaching platform. So, what are you accepting right now that requires changing? Knowing when to focus on the smaller points of life and the larger aspects, the nuts and bolts. This is something that many people become mixed up in, and you may have already gone past this point. In this world, we need to be both. We need to be those who think about the nuts and bolts, and we need to be those innovators who think in a space where the finer points don't matter. Both have a place, but all too often people live in those spaces and remain there. What I'm going to invite you to do is to explore both, generalizing but not truth. An aircraft mechanic would be considered as nuts and bolts. An artist would be considered as the bigger picture. For a short time, I'm going to invite you to live in the nuts and bolts when strategizing. Look at the bigger picture for the rest of the time. Doing so allows flexibility where it counts. The more you develop and increase your confidence, the more you will rely on the future version of self for the solutions to the present moment challenges, rather than looking to the past for the answers. It's not about shelving the past issues or concerns, but rather dealing with them and accepting that a lot of effort can be wasted in reflecting on the past when the same amount of energy can be utilized in the best way to move forward and build a productive version of self. When working with a client, it's only generally the first couple of sessions that we look to the past to resolve any issues, before making forgiveness and then moving on to building a solid foundation to act in the present. Because who cares? A person who should care is you. Allow others to judge, but that is their truth. There's no reason why you should have any kind of ownership over that, unless you freely accept. So who cares? Only you and your best interest. And if it doesn't support it, then why hold on to it? Let it go. So why would now be a good time to release the judgment any other has on you? Another hard-hitting approach towards improvement and development when you face challenges outside of your control, perhaps even lose motivation. And this will happen. It's part of operating at that high level that allows the lack of motivation to happen. Someone is not competing at this high level lacks the motivation and has little need to lack something that is not required. So lacking motivation is perfectly normal. Once you've identified it, avoid the temptation to live within that space. Blah 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 and move on. I said blah 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 because it's often the people with all the excuses in the world who are the reasons why they're not moving. In my world, just get on with it. That energy spent talking about all of the reasons why you can't should be used to find a way that you can. It's really as simple as that. As I've said in the past, the removal of the distractions is essential, whether internal or external. And the more that you can commit and align yourself with being that person, and the clearer the image, the quicker you will be able to release any negative distractions. So how can you interrupt these patterns in the future, should they occur? When is it time to celebrate? Once you've achieved the goal, you deserve it. There are plenty of concepts in the world that you should make and reward yourself with small rewards that continue to motivate you to the higher purpose. And although I agree with it to a certain degree, very rarely do I meet someone who has rewarded themselves at the right time. Often it comes too early, and as a result of limited intention. To me, celebration comes after the event, during reflection, and at a time where that springboard goal is completed. As I've said all along, if you're happy being mediocre and living in that space, then that's fine by me. If you're looking for high performance, ready to take the steps to be higher than self, then there is little time to be celebrating anything other than completion. It's a hard attitude to take, and I've taken criticism for it, but I wouldn't reward my children for half tidying their room. The reward comes in the finish. So when would be an acceptable time for you to celebrate, and why? Referencing. Understanding where you currently go to find information is similar to how a library works. We have our own bank, filled and sorted in a way that your internal processor can quickly access, so certain actions can happen without a momentary pause. Systematically filed and usually ordered in a way that is unique to you. With this being said, just as books can be misfiled, your internal library can also do so at times, with time spent reorganizing and adjusting to your new mindset. In my library at home, the physical not the mental, I order books by topic, interest, not by conventional author or book name. This way, should I ever need to reference a book based on a type of flower, I can chunk up from flowers to gardening to nature, and usually find the book title that suits the solution to the answer I'm looking for. I file my mental library in a similar way, with the aisles for the larger topic, and the shelves with the genre, and then the second subdivided into the specific topics. I utilize this system to work both ways. For example, if I were looking for a new set for swimming technique, I would either go to swimming and find the solution, or to the fitness area and chunk down. With most athletes, due to the high level of growth usually encountered, not much thought has been given to the organisation of their thoughts or all of the conscious effort required to designing a filing system whereby they can access these at any time. They may seem like a processor is naturally taken care of by the subconscious mind, but the more control you take over how you file information internally, the more control you take over the speed at which you can access information. This technique has proven with clients to increase not only their mental endurance, but also their memory. Sure, aspects of life are going to be automated, such as breathing and various hierarchies of needs, but for the most part, a conscious effort is given. So think for a moment how you file your information. How could it be improved? How will the conscious act of filing the information bring about an increased awareness over what thoughts have been left to run of their own course, without any control over the use or need? Think for a moment. If you encounter any difficulties in accessing this place, then spend a moment to meditate. Clear your mind of all thoughts. Allow any thoughts to drift away and visualize a physical library, creating your own internal library based on this blueprint. See all that you need to see and build it in a way that allows you to regain control over what is placed in this internal aspect of self. Remember a solution-focused attitude when building this new filing system for your mind, and how perhaps the past could have anchored you to think in a certain way. Taking ownership over how it can appear and how easily you can access the information you need is understanding the difference between the stuff you need and the stuff that you want, and the difference it makes to the person you want to be and become. When you shift your thinking and thoughts, you notice the energy shift and the conversations change. And as you do this, ask the questions, where can I go with this? Spend a moment to meditate in this place, feeling comfortable, and enjoy where it leads you. Self-sabotage. There is no doubt that every athlete would have experienced this at least once in their career. And I think it's something that almost every person, irrelevant of birthplace, will encounter. It's rooted deep in one's energy, and for humans, it's something that, unless controlled or you are aware of it, can cause major disruptions or intermittent limitations. Self-sabotage is usually encountered in one of two situations. The first situation is where you've achieved an intended goal and the drive and determination are lost shortly afterwards. Thinking back to the springboard goal strategy, this avoids that moment of reduced productivity state. The second and most common is where the athlete will sabotage shortly prior to the completion of an event, because the fear of the unknown post-event and an internal need to draw out the completion. Not spending too much time in this topic, if you've established a quality legacy statement and adopted the springboard goal-setting strategy, you'll avoid this self-sabotage altogether. Highlighting this factor should have created awareness, perhaps even opened up that honest conversation internally. Ensure that this is something you avoid in the future by creating an awareness and a strategy to adopt this self-sabotage creeping in. Remember, it's the journey to high performance that produces fulfillment. The medal or title is only valued for that micro moment. Make the legacy the life, and the medal or title the byproduct of living a life of purpose and value to self. So where in the past have you sabotaged an event? What can you do in the future to ensure that this strategy is broken? Truth. I talk a lot about the need for truth and the importance of acting in a way that is truthful to self. And I do this because I meet so many people who on a daily basis are living lies. They're living in a space that isn't supportive to who they want to be, caught up in the rat race of life, working in environments only to support the CEO of the business, unhappy and unfulfilled, signed up to a debt culture. The athletes on their journey to achieve high levels of performance and betterment must unsubscribe to this way of living. And at times being truthful can hurt. It can hurt others who have been caught up in the lies and internal deceit. And once you're able to subscribe yourself to the truth, there is no other way. For me, it's always been as simple as that. If you don't like it, then change it. If you're waking up in the morning excited about going to the gym, following your dreams and aspirations, you have to cut back on certain luxuries in which you've been accustomed. Then what trumps what? What value have you placed over internal fulfillment? This is something that only you can answer. What truth needs to be realized right now? Why have you avoided it in the past? Why is now the right time to make some changes to this past way of living? Perception and lies. This for most is an eye-opener and one that takes a little while for you to get your head around, especially if the previous exercise of becoming truthful with yourself has highlighted aspects of your life that perhaps you've been hiding from. Perception and lies highlight what we're telling ourselves about where we fit truthfully into the equation. For most athletes, the margins are either 20% over or 20% under the truth, being either 20% better or worse than the actual figure. Now, these boundaries aren't necessarily so important, less so than most people would naturally assume. For me, they highlight one fundamental factor: purpose. When someone over-exaggerates the performance level, they do so because of a reason. When someone under-exaggerates the performance level, they do so because of a completely different reason to when they over-exaggerate. In saying this, it may have triggered an internal conversation with self and something you can relate to. So why do you over-exaggerate or under-exaggerate? Why would it be helpful for you to change? How does acting in this truthful state bring about less conflict internally? Overloading the mind. It's time to pause. There's been lots of information to consider. At times in just listening, some of the content here may have challenged the way that you believe. You may be having doubts about your ability to achieve, whether to continue or whether to give up. So now it's time to pause for a moment. Be truthful about self. Understand why you want this journey and whether your legacy statement represents a true version of what you want to become. This is the time when you should make alterations to the statement and align yourself perfectly right now. So, what is your legacy statement? Relationships. You may think it's odd to talk about relationship in a book focused on improving an athlete's ability, but for me, the relationship you have with self has a bond greater than anything that can be produced through external coaching. The way you communicate with yourself both in and out of sporting events will improve connection that you have, far greater than any nutritional or physical shifts you may encounter. A relationship, when broken down, can be summarized in the word relationship. How you relate, and the vessel in which you do, the ship. Relationship in modern society has taken its form into more of a partnership, a connection between two people. And of course this is not true, but the relationship for me is more about the way in which you communicate and how it's done so. The foundations of improving that relationship starts with the improvement in communication. Think about the words that you use to describe yourself, the structure of the sentences used, and how dramatically the answers depend on the way that it's structured, and those communications that you choose to remove yourself from as a result of the emotional drama created by subscribing. Relationships, therefore, are the stepping stones that should be considered right now. Here's a simple exercise to open up your awareness. Over the next 2 days, when communicating with others, listen to the words that they use. When I say listen, really listen. Understand how each word used is a reflection of a conversation happening internally for them, how their projection is playing out their values and beliefs around their truth. As you do, digest what they are saying and how perhaps that past version of you would have taken this as truth, and how perhaps it would have affected your internal relationship. This is a brilliant exercise to use at work and even at home, and you'll find that the more that you really listen to another's way of communicating, the more you'll consciously construct the conversations that you have internally, and be aware of the words and the impact that all the questions have within your life. Think about one person right now, how their communication has affected your thoughts in the past. Forgiveness. Again, a topic that's been covered, but it's important just to revisit. Perhaps your mindset has shifted and your understanding of other factors has now evolved. If you find yourself still carrying any baggage of the past, any burdens or inherited beliefs, now is the time to revisit perhaps that aspect of the past and forgive all that is required in order for you to move forward with the freedom. Forgiveness can be a simple phone conversation, can be a text message, and can even become a message that isn't delivered either to self or another. It can be a message that is written down and burnt, or an email that has been created then deleted. The intention of this is not to revisit the pain of the past, but for it to dissolve and no longer become part of your strategies or your reflection into the person that you're evolving into. The essential part here is to forgive the past to avoid any procrastination. Get on and do, and move on with the peace of mind that there is no future need to go to that space again. And why would you? Why would you carry around with you any burden that does not positively support a future version of self? Why would you carry the inherited beliefs of another based on their own limitations? Why wouldn't you just forgive and move on? Who do you need to forgive and why? What will happen if you continue to hold on to that baggage? What has been the purpose of holding on to that baggage for so long? Creating a high demanding attitude. Living in this demanding space of growth and developing almost will certainly bring around mindful fatigue. Therefore, within your schedule, I'd like you to add in at least 15 minutes of mindful meditation. Although this is not an excessive amount of time, these few minutes spent consciously will often bring about an increased clarity for the day and a more purposeful thought structure. So go ahead right now. Revisit your schedule or daily planner and dedicate just 15 minutes, if you haven't already, to doing nothing. Remember, the commitment is to follow through with this schedule, having a no matters what attitude and removing the aspects of your usual day that have little or no support for the end objective. It may seem highly regimented, but the more you build upon this foundation, the more flexibility you will find as you consciously remove aspects that have been draining your time, progress, energy journey. If you were to halve your time on social media, what shifts would you make to your daily schedule? My scruffy hair. How important is it really? For years in my coaching practice, I took the belief that in order to be the best, I had to present myself in a way that created a character, an expectation of the outside world. This character and how well it was presented would determine my own success. I was wrong. From the type of shirt I wear, the chinos, the cut of the suit, or even the registration and year of my car is not a representation of my ability to achieve or deliver. In fact, the smokescreen that many put up is to distract the truth and the ability behind the message. And I mention this now because as you evolve, it's likely that as you look beyond the materialistic, may perhaps even relinquish some of those aspects that you didn't think were essential or even attached to your success, and simplify various other aspects of your life. I'm unshaven. I don't use hair products because I don't like the chemicals used, and I turn up for interviews in shorts and flip-flops. Not because I have little respect for anyone else, but because it's where I feel most comfortable and where I'm able to deliver the best. Sure, I enjoy driving a nice car, I enjoy a tailor-made suit, but it's not my identity. It's certainly not a representation of truth or my ability as a professional coach. And I mention this again because as you challenge your past beliefs, there will be aspects of your past life that will still matter, and I'm okay with this. The question or not is whether you enjoy the finer things in life, but whether it's a smokescreen to avoid the realization of truth. It's not an area that I want to get caught up on, and of course people have their own opinions, especially when people remove that judgment aspect of self. But just file this into the back of the mind somewhere, for a time where perhaps you ask yourself, for what purpose? For what purpose am I using, buying, believing this is important to me, and why? So, what smokescreens have you been putting up? What security did this offer? How can you shift this thinking? How would this be a more supportive to a future you? The desert island. In this exercise, you're going to need a stopwatch and a pen. This is a great exercise to repeat over the coming weeks and then compare how the results differ. There are no right or wrong answers within this exercise. It's entirely dependent on your current state. Right now in the present moment, I'd like you to think about the past, having just 3 minutes to decide what you'd like to carry from the past through into the future. You have 3 minutes. Follow the same process but go to the future. Go to the future and decide what in the future you'd like to bring back to the present moment. Now imagine yourself arriving onto the island with all that you have brought into the present from the past and all that you've brought into the present from the future. Ask yourself now if there's any aspect you'd like to change and why these changes would be made. This exercise is a great way to recheck whether you're attracting the right things into your life. When your mindset is focused on the future version of self, and a quick reminder that you will, without conscious effort, still reflect back to the past, and that's okay. It's where you're reflecting which is key. Go through the list of things, remembering there is no right or wrong answers, just your answers, and see if there's anything you're taking with you that is done so for anyone else. Person and character. I've already explained the difference between personality and characters, with personality being the person that you are when pressure is applied, and the characters are the many people that you play on a daily basis depending on the circumstances in which you are placed. I'm not the person that I am when working with a client, that I would be when dealing with my children. If, however, I am challenged by putting myself in a position where my fight, flight or freeze state is applied, then my personality will be shown. I mention this again because, as we've covered in relationships, it's essential that we dig deep into the true meaning of who we are. And again, as we have evolved through this, there can be questions, perhaps aspiring, alternative thinking and alternative thoughts about your identity. And that's okay. That is the purpose of the here and now, and the purpose of challenging who you've become. So right now, imagine yourself in a situation where you're completely alone, where it's a matter of life and death, where you cannot play a character to get yourself out of the situation. The true version of you will come to fruition. Who is that person? If you could have a superpower at this moment, what would it be? Bringing this into reality, how can you have this or this adaptation? What benefits would it bring? What's stopping you from having this? Are you selfish? If you follow your own dreams and aspirations, and it doesn't fall into another's wavelength, are you being selfish? This is something that comes up in almost every client one-to-one, how they were called selfish by childhood friends, parents, and even loved ones. In my world, this needs management, because on most occasions it's not the individual that's being selfish, it's a realization of another's own world which is in question. As a result of that reflection, it can be deemed by another to be selfish. Now, how quickly you can resolve this circumstance will depend on how stable and solid the relationship is, and how your communication has evolved. My invitation to you is to be resilient on your journey and avoid the temptation to play down your own dreams and aspirations to fit in with another's ideal of the world. Your life is your choice, and it's you that's going to have to live either with fulfillment or without. I remember an awkward conversation many years ago when a childhood friend of 20 years said that he couldn't be my friend anymore because my success was showing him up with his family and his girlfriend. It seems shocking when you put it down on paper, but this is a very real conversation that many people have in their head, but very few have the audacity to say out loud. People often do not reflect their behaviour. In fact, just as you have learnt at times, there can be more happening behind the scenes than meets the eye. With the temptation to conclude a perception of another, you're closing any opportunities that may bring into the future. Some of my closest friends perhaps would not be my friends if I would have taken their initial face value in communication. As I said before, remove the drama, but it's important to understand to leave the doors open so that should an individual evolve back into that space, there's an opportunity for them to bring the relationship back up to a level which you choose that is acceptable. So how have you been restricted in the past as a result of feeling selfish? How would things have turned out differently if you had acted in your best interest? What is the intention of this thought? If you were to question the intention of every thought you had, how much more productive would you be? It's important to be realistic in our expectations of the availability to achieve, but I'm going to invite you to question the intention of all of your actions, your behaviours, relationships, and internal communication. As you increase the control that you take and slow down the process, the awareness grows over your peripheral. Perhaps you can choose to change some unproductive behaviours that you demonstrated in the past, or perhaps how you enter into a space. The intention as you enter into an internal dialogue radically changes the conversations that are produced and the answers that are provided. Talking as the first person in the third person. Many exercises that you can use in training the mind include talking as a third person, and when you start to involve your language and communication internally, you may find that you've been talking about your third person being completely disassociated with ownership of self. My recommendation here, and it's part of the improvement in language and the development of ownership, would be to remove any disassociating when describing self. This again may cause conflict among my peers, but what I found in coaching some of the most elite is that by adding ownership and visualizing events through your own eyes, this creates the pathways internally, but with the familiarity required to deliver. It removes the what did they do and shifts to how did I do it. The shift in language and ownership has proven time and time again to create fantastic results in times of increased stress. So I invite you to adopt this shift in thinking if you haven't already, especially when utilizing visualization to guide you and control self. Nature versus nurture. This is a tricky one and an area where there's been masses of studies to argue for and against. The one thing for sure is both have a place. Both have significant evidence to support their claims, and both have an important role to play when it comes to elite athletes. There's no getting away from our genetic makeup, the environmental factors during our adolescence, and the nurture from parents, coaches, and anyone else who has supported inspiring athletes during their younger days. But even those who don't have the genetic makeup similar to those performing at the elite level should not be discouraged. There's a very real reason why. A large majority of those with the natural DNA have the perfect genome to support the discipline, but do not have the mindset or determination to deliver. A 5'2" basketball player is unlikely to reach the same potential as those at 6'5" to 7 feet, but those at 6'3" with the drive and determination still have, in my opinion, an equal opportunity. This hardware versus software debate will go on into the future, and not an area I want to focus the efforts on now. But I'm sure that if you're at this stage and looking to improve your mental performance, you've developed a certain level which is beyond the basics of sport selection. If you're not at this stage, then I beg you right now to separate yourself from the fact versus fiction thought process. I invite you to do this, not because I'm looking to belittle any dreams or aspirations, but for those 1%ers, having the body to build upon is certainly a foundation that can't be missed. For me, I will unlikely ever to be a sprinter, not because I can't sprint, but my slow and fast twitch muscle fibers are not in the correct correlation compared to those at the upper performers. With training I can improve, but certain bone growth factors further inhibit my natural ability to progress beyond a threshold, not forgetting my age and the investment required to get to this place. So honesty please, can you improve based on any physical limitations? Practice on your own. This concept has aggravated some of the sporting teams I've worked with over the last few years. Not because I've taken anything away from them, but because the traditional coaching method is to work within the team at every waking hour. For me, a minimum of 3 hours per week practicing alone has proven to be worth the short-term shift and reduce the choking effect that some team players experience when entering a structured team training session. I've seen some of the most promising athletes fail within weeks of entering a team environment, not because of the inability to work within the team, but because they have lacked the breathing space that allowed them to reach this place in the first instance. From newly promoted Premier football players to equestrians, the effect can be disastrous unless addressed early on. What would you do if you could incorporate just 3 hours of training on your own per week? So that's it. I've come to the conclusion of this introduction into building mental toughness. I'm sure there will be more thinking that is spurred, and I hope that you join me by downloading my audiobook, The New Encyclopedia of Sports Psychology, or if not, you can head over to Amazon and pick up a copy packed full of the strategies and techniques that have helped my clients from keen amateurs to Olympic medalists. It's a small price to pay for such fundamental results. Most won't take action. My question for you isn't whether you will or will not, but are you ready?